So next up, we have David Freeman, who is part of our executive team and our chapter head for Washington, D.C.
Thank you, David. So our question was, what are the key similarities between the CPA and the Chartered Qualification? The consensus was that they both have accountant in their name, so that's it. I'm done. Thank you. In fact, it was the other way. It was one of the key differences between the CA and the Chartered, the CPA qualification. So while Barbara was talking there, I was furiously trying to figure out how to summarize this, and I came up with a great one. So
wait a minute, that meant when I spoke you weren't paying any attention.
I was multitasking.
All right.
Okay. So let's start at the beginning with education. So the diversity of the chartered qualification is significant in the education front because the qualification attracts graduates with all sorts of degrees, whereas here the accounting profession is made up of people who have taken accounting degrees. And really that's the only pathway as we speak today to becoming a CPA. And there is a diversity not only of degrees but of pathways for the chartered exam. When I was becoming a chartered accountant, I chose not to go to university and get a degree, and here I am. You know, that's not possible with the qualification, the CPA qualification. So there's the underlying education, which is very different, and then there's the examination. The examination for the chartered qualification is, well, I'm sure you all know, is fairly punishing. The CPA qualification is comparatively easier. I won't say simple, but it's easier. So the bar is a little bit lower for CPA candidates versus chartered ones. And then the experience that they get to qualification, which is very, very different. I mean, the chartered examination, and I don't need to tell you this, but it mixes work experience and study, whereas a CPA, you come out as a newly minted CPA and your work experience is comparatively negligible. So that's a big difference on that. And then once you've actually qualified, so those are the 3 E's. I came up with 3 C's for what happens once you've qualified. So firstly, career. I mean, if you did word association for a CPA in the United States, any member of the general public, what's the first word that they would respond with?
Tax.
Tax, right? Probably the second one is audit. And really that has compartmentalized the CPA qualification here. If you look at the number of CFOs that are CPAs, it's a lot less than chartered accountants being in financial executive leadership. So it comes to the second point, which really is compensation for CPAs is generally a lot lower, particularly in the early years, lower than it is for chartered accountants. And then the other thing about the CPA qualification is there's actually a lot of competition that candidates have. They have choices. They could go in law. I mean, law has a far bigger place in the accounting world here than it does in the chartered world. And then, finance is very attractive, far higher salaries than the accounting here. And of course, the other qualification that will take precedence and has more prestige is the MBA. And that's probably the better stepping stone if you want to go into financial management than the CPA exam. And there is a pipeline problem here it's actually more to do with, it's actually a demand side, but the supply side cannot keep up. You may have heard that there's actually a shortage, a decline in the number of CPAs. That's not factually correct. There is actually a slow growth, but that's the problem. It's slow growth. So you combine a career which is comparatively easy to get into, except you have to get 150 credits to do that, which is going to cost you an arm and a leg to do. And then you take these examinations. You don't get paid well. You're in a job that requires long hours. It requires travel. I mean, why would you choose to become a CPA unless you really had not much other choice? So there really are a lot of questions about I'll use the word sustainability of the CPA path in this country when it's just not attractive. I mean, there has to be some structural change to make it more attractive for young people to come into, not just graduates, but anyone else who wants to take an apprenticeship type route, like is accessible in many of our countries. So that's kind of just to summarize what our table came up with. I will take any questions. Peter, if you want to make a statement, that's fine. Questions?
Okay. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the Irish Institute, we were recently asked to vote on whether we would merge with CPA Ireland. And it was a difficult decision because certainly when I was doing my articles, it was like, oh yeah, CPA is multiple choice exam. And it wasn't given much regard. And now we're faced as an institute looking at being merged altogether. And so we're all in the one pot now. And it looks like that will move forward as well. So I know it's just a different three-letter acronym, but what would you say if CPA and chartered accountants worldwide suddenly started to just merge into one group of so-called accountants?
Well, firstly, I don't think that there are structural reasons why I don't think that could happen. It would actually be a very, very interesting scenario. What would it mean to all of us? How would we feel as people in the profession? What would it do to our prospects? What would it do to our compensation? I don't have a good answer. But there are 1.8 million chartered accountants and students. There are less CPAs in the world. So, you wouldn't think so from sitting here in the United States, but we're the dominant brand, just not in this country at the moment. And I can't see that changing in the foreseeable future because the institutes can't put in the resources that would be necessary to be able to grow this in a way that the US CPA profession is growing internationally and offering examination in multiple countries, that the charter ones more likely to end up in competition with one another in certain markets, which is regrettable. I would actually like to see, and one day I expect it more likely, that the chartered profession will merge in some global fashion, because there's so much alignment, there's so much cooperation that goes on between them now. I think that's a possibility, and certainly in the United Kingdom, where if you look at the United Kingdom from here, where the three institutes, it doesn't make sense for Little Britain to have three separate institutes. It's political. It is political. It doesn't make any sense. So that would be a good starting point. And with the other, 16 major institutes who do not have, quite frankly, most of them don't have the resources to be able to provide the sort of regulatory member service type capabilities that are necessary. I think there's a strong argument to be made in the same way as New Zealand and Australia merged. I think that's where we should be heading.
Great, thank you. With David Powell as the CEO.
Of course. Thank you, Declan. So, any other questions? We'll do one or two more questions, and we'll move on. Otherwise we'll-
It's not so much as a question as a comment. I think what helps the branding of the CA call it crazy is that it's like by royal charter as well. And in the countries where, for example, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, England, that means something. It just means something to be affiliated with like the crown. So I think that also adds an element to its branding. Yes.
When in a country that loves Downton Abbey, if someone understood, because then you've got to explain what chartered actually means, that it is a royal charter. Thank you, Queen Victoria. But whether anyone would regard that as important here in making a determination, given a choice between a CPA and a chartered accountant, I'm not sure. But it's nice to have a royal charter.
One last question.
I have a question. I have a question and a comment. One question was related to the people that are coming into the chartered accountancy that you were speaking to about. Is the same concern around lack of availability or lack of interest, does it apply there too, or is it mainly related to CPAs where we're seeing the shortage?
So far as I'm aware, and I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I think the chartered qualification is very vibrant and attracting still a lot more students into it because there's certain prestige to it. There's good compensation, and it opens up paths to all sorts of career options as well. You're not just staying in practice. So I think there's just some fundamentals there compared to the CPA when there's too much competition for the CPA qualification here for it to be as vibrant as the chartered qualification.
The comment I was going to make is around, certainly I've gone through the Canadian process, and then I've also sat the reciprocity exams here in the US. And it's like many years apart, but what I will say is that I think that was also more of a feeling that it was a profession. When I was in Canada, the celebration that goes along with just going through the process, getting your exams, the results, it was very different than when you go to a computer and type it in and then you get a letter in the mail telling you, okay, you're now a CPA. So there is a distinction there, and it's been interesting in a lot of so to me, that's more of a tone, but you see a lot of comments now around people speaking about, even in the CPA world, that this is a profession. Sometimes people call it an industry, which goes to that point you were talking about, right? Where people think of it as an industry similar to other industries. And there's a distinction. So you'll see even members of the SEC that when they speak about this, they revert back to, and they make a point of saying, this is a noble profession, and reminding people that that is the case. So I think there's a lot in terms of that base that is just like rebuilding a lot of the stature that the profession enjoyed and I think could enjoy again.
Thank you. So time for us to move to our next session.